reserves the right.
In explaining my reservation, I first want to commend the senator from South Carolina for his courtesy as he has extended to both sides of the aisle by notifying us of his intent to make this unanimous consent request. I want to make it clear to him and to all members that the Senate Democratic leadership remains fully committed to earmark disclosure, but we believe that his suggestion, taking it piece by piece, is not the right way to accomplish our goal. Earlier this year, we considered comprehensive ethics reform. It is a product of the first 100 days of the new leadership of Congress that we're most proud of. Included in that reform was an important provision relating to transparency in earmarking. I supported this reform. In fact, I joined Senator DeMint in crafting a new definition of earmark and requiring that earmarks in legislation be posted on the Internet prior to their final consideration on the floor of the Senate. We both agreed on this language. It passed with an overwhelming bipartisan vote of 98-0, and the underlying ethics reform bill passed 96-2. No one is suggesting that these earmark rules will not be implemented. In fact, today, the Senate Appropriations Committee, chaired by the President of the Senate, who is now presiding, Senator Byrd, has announced a new policy of transparency and accountability totally consistent with the language which we agreed on and adopted overwhelmingly on the floor of the Senate. I ask unanimous consent that the committee's announcement on these sweeping reforms be inserted for the record at this point.
Is there objection? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered.
Mr. President, under these new guidelines, all earmarks will be clearly identified in the committee bill and report, including the requesting senator, the amount of the earmark, the recipient of the earmark, and the purpose of the earmark. An earmark shall be defined as in the Senate-passed ethics reform bill, which Mr. DeMint and I co-sponsored. The committee bill and report will be published on the Internet as my amendment required, so that the world can see these earmarks in advance of final passage. Senators will be required to certify that neither they nor their spouses have any financial interest in any earmark. These guidelines will be in place until the ethics reform is signed into law. And I want to commend the presiding officer as chairman of the Appropriations Committee for reaching out to the other side of the aisle, to the ranking member, Senator Cochran of Mississippi, so that he has been informed of our intention to reform this earmark process. Earmark disclosure, though, is only one part of a much broader package. We need to strengthen gift and travel rules for members of the Senate, close the revolving door, strengthen lobbying disclosure, outlaw the K Street project, this notorious project that Mr. Abramoff and others were involved in, and take other steps to clean up the way business is done in Washington. Now, if the senator from South Carolina has his way, we'll take one piece today. Someone will suggest taking another piece tomorrow. Ultimately, I think it will dilute our effort. We need, within the next few weeks, to work with the House to pass this measure. For those who ask, well, why hasn't it taken place so far? The House ethics reform was done by House rule, did not involve a joint action by the House and the Senate. So we are going to find a vehicle that will accomplish our Senate ethics reform, statutory and rules reform, and do it in the appropriate manner, and do it in a comprehensive way. We've been assured by House leaders they'll move on this bill in the next few weeks, and as soon as the House acts, the Senate will move for conference as quickly as possible. We should not take up bits and pieces of this larger bill. The Senate has expressed its strong support for earmark disclosure. The Senate Appropriations Committee, which I am proud to be a member of, has taken the lead on this side of the aisle in strong reforms. The senator from South Carolina's goal is already being implemented. I hope he can take yes for an answer. And I would like to correct one thing that he said for the record. When he started his remarks about earmarks, he said at one point that when it comes to earmarks, this Senate is business as usual. As the presiding officer knows, and those who follow the Senate, that is hardly the case. When we considered the continuing resolution, which had all of the pending appropriations bills from the previously Republican-controlled Congress yet enacted, we took a bold move on our part, the Democratic side, and eliminated 9,300 earmarks that were in bills authored when the senator from South Carolina was in the majority. We eliminated every single one of them, all 9,300 earmarks. It contained no new earmarks. This continuing resolution eliminated funding for over $2.1 billion of earmarks for over 1,900 separate projects. This is hardly business as usual. Business as usual would have been to take the bills from the Republican Congress with thousands of earmarks and enact them into law. We didn't do that. So to suggest that we are continuing along the path that was the case when there were previous leaders in Congress is just not supported by the facts. And beyond that, I can give my assurance to the gentleman from South Carolina, my colleague, that the earmark language which we adopted in the Senate here is going to be the standard that we live by. The Appropriations Committee has made that very clear, and I think that is what we should do. So at this point, Mr. President, acknowledging the commitment of the gentleman from South Carolina to this issue, and acknowledging that he should be standing here and saying that he's accomplished quite a bit to this point, I would have to say that his additional suggestion today of plucking out one piece of ethics reform and moving on it would be inconsistent with our ultimate goal of having comprehensive ethics reform. In the meantime, we have followed this measure through the Senate Appropriations Committee, and as a consequence, Mr. President, I must object.